Hi and welcome back to Sumatra on Bass. I hope you're doing great. Being that we're in lockdown, I've been spending a bit more time in the evenings talking to people from all over the place about many subjects, and it's interesting to see on forums the kind of questions that get asked, and one of them that comes up a lot is, how low is your action? So this is usually by players that are sort of newish players, or players that have been playing a while but they've never considered their action, probably because they take it maybe to a guitar tech who sets it up as a sort of standard setup and says, this is great, this is how it should be. And then sometimes they may have a little bit of pain or something after playing, and they wonder if they can lower the action, so they start to ask people on forums, which is quite natural, right? You go to a group of people that do the same thing and ask around. Now, inadvertently, a lot of people come back and say, oh, mine is a millimeter off the frets at the last fret. Or somebody will say, I've got 2/32 at the 17th fret, something like that. Okay, now, that little bit of information for somebody new to this, as a new player or just new to adjusting the bass, that can be very confusing because it's only partial information. That's just giving you a height between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string somewhere at some fret, okay? And action is the relationship between the relief of the neck and the string height. And that's what gives the bass its feel, which is really important. So sometimes people read that 1 millimeter action and they go away and go, oh man, mine is really high. It's like, oh geez, it's unplayable, or something's wrong. Now, in general, just a few things out of the way. We've already done a couple of videos on setups, and I'll put one just up here on that card if you want to go and have a look at that, just a restring and a setup to give you a bit more info on how I do it. But I'm going to assume that your nut is cut properly and it's not too high in this first fret position here, that the frets are in good condition and quite even, and that's really about it. The other thing is that we'll discuss is the neck relief. So first of all, and the first thing to understand is, this is not a competition. The person that has the lowest action does not win. You do not get a prize. It's not like that at all. It boils down to a few things which we'll discuss here reasonably quickly, because I don't want this video to be too long. So the first one is, yes, you can take a really low action, and it depends how you play. If you play really aggressively, you're going to need higher action, you know, closer to the neck here, rather than say back here. So a lot of guys play, and they play back here near the over the bridge pickup, and the string doesn't move nearly as much there as it does here, right? So if you're playing here consistently, you can take a lower action. If you're playing here consistently, you have to use a gentler touch with the same action. And if you really dig in here, then you're going to need a slightly higher action to compensate for digging in. And the reason for that is, we can't overcome the laws of physics. That string, especially the B string on a 5 string, that is going to move. It is going to wobble around, and I've done a little video here, but there's lots of great videos with a high-speed camera on the internet if you search for those, and you'll see that it does these wild movements, you know. So it needs clearance to be able to facilitate that. And if you look at the standard setup, say on, I think, Fender's website, it'll have something like 0.012 to 0.014 relief at the 7th fret, and the string height will be something like 3/32 across the board at the 17th fret. So that's all great. You can capo the first fret, so you've got a hand free, press down on the last fret, get some feeler gauges, slide them in under the string at the 7th fret, and you can gauge the clearance. If it's got a gap, say a 0.012, if it's got a gap between the string and the fret, you need to tighten the truss rod. If it is moving the string or deflecting it in any way, the gap is too small and you need to loosen the truss rod. Now, Roger Sadowski, his basses are very popular. His low side, so he's a little bit different. He says, adjust the truss rod so that this first position here plays cleanly. And then you can tighten it until you start to get a little bit of buzz introduced at this position, and then back it off. And that's a fairly straight neck. Then he says, with the capo still on the first, it's 2 32nds at the 12th fret to 3 32nds for the E string, and the B string slightly more than that. And that's his low side setup. His high side setup is 3 32nds to 4 32nds, the G to the E string. And he states that some players can go a little bit lower than his low setup, mainly Latin players, guys that play with a really soft touch, as we said back here near the bridge. So there's that. And if I set my bass up that way, it's quite playable, don't get me wrong, it's good action. But I can take it a little bit lower because I don't really pluck that hard, regardless of my hand position. I turn up the amp and let it do the work. The other thing that gets confusing for people is when you see somebody playing the bass like this, it looks like the action is really, really low. It's only when I flip it up this way you can see that there is, in fact, more room than it appears to be when it's in this, at this angle between the string and the fret. So my standard setup is to capo the first fret, hold down at the last fret, 0.010 of an inch at the 7th fret, that's the gap, and then at the last fret, regardless of how many frets the bass has, it's 2 32nds to 2.5 32nds, or 5 64ths on the E string, and these two strings somewhere in between, and on the B string a hair under 3 32nds, really. And that's my standard setup, and that feels good to me. For the way I play, I don't get any rattles or fret buzzes. Now, when you're setting this up and you're trying different things, always ensure that you do it with the bass plugged in. Because sometimes little rattles that you can hear, because your ear's so close to the bass, they don't translate through the amp anyway. And the other thing is, if you've got no amp, you are always plucking a little bit harder to hear the string because it's an electric instrument. So it's not going to give you a good indication. You need to plug it in and try it and see how it sounds and feels to you. Now if we look at this diagram, you'll see there's really 3 main conditions of the neck. It's either got a forward bow, which is the top drawing, and that straight line represents the string. And what happens there is the middle part of the fretboard around here feels like the strings are too high and it's hard to press down. So if you don't understand how it all works, then you kind of drop the bridge saddles over here to get the strings lower, and then it feels okay in the middle, but it starts to buzz because it's hitting the higher frets because it doesn't have enough clearance. The opposite of that is when it has a back bow and you have a hump in the middle. Now this first position here is going to buzz. So again, if you compensate for that to get the clearance by raising the bridge saddles, you'll get it playing nicely along here, but from about the 10th or 12th fret up, it's going to be again hard to play because the strings are too high. And then the last little diagram there is when the neck relief is set correctly. And that means you've got a nice little gentle slope as you look down the end of the neck like this, and you consider the string as a straight edge. You can see a nice gentle slope of the fretboard and the frets, giving enough clearance to vibrate freely without getting too many rattles or buzzes. Good technique, fretting technique, always fret near the fret, not somewhere between the frets. Just go as close as possible to the fret at which you're fretting. That will help you get a cleaner tone. And then there's a few other things that affect your action that most people don't really talk about. And one of those things is the strings. So just for a little exercise, I've got 3 different types of strings here. There is they're all the same gauge, they're all E string 105s. One of them is a round core, round wound. The other one is a hex core, round wound. And the last one is a flat wound, D'Addario Crown. I think they have a hex core also. So when I line up the ball ends perfectly, and then I just let them droop down that way, you'll notice that they have different flexibility. Some are stiffer than others. So if I string a bass, any one of my basses, with the round core, round wound string, and I set the action to my preference, and I play the way I normally play, it's all good. If I use this hex core, this one's a GHS boomer, they feel a little bit stiffer, and you can see why. Because the hex shape of the core gives it more stiffness, right? I can set the action marginally lower, and it may be like half of a 64th. And if I use flat wounds, like the D'Addario Chrome, I can set it a bit lower still. Now that's not to say that you should go to the flat wound because you want to set the action lower. You should always choose the string based on the sound you're trying to produce. So if you like really nice bright stainless steel rounds and the round core feels good to you, great. If that feels too floppy, try a hex core round wound stainless steel and you'll see there's a difference. So that plays into that equation. Yeah. So for me, 10/1000ths of an inch relief at the 7th fret and 2/32 to 5/64 from the G and E string respectively at the last fret is pretty much as low as you'd really want to go. That should feel pretty good and pretty playable. You shouldn't have any problems with that, depending again on your technique. Now if you are getting some rattling and buzzing consistently across that, you may need a little bit more relief and a little bit higher action. So you might go to 0.012 or 0.014 inches at the 7th fret, and you might go as high as 3/32 to 4/32, the G and E strings respectively, to get what you want. So it depends how you play. I'm a big proponent of playing light and letting the amp do the work because your hands get less tired, and the upside of that is that you learn to play more cleanly, and because your hands are sympathetic, you don't fret as hard. So you don't get the same amount of fret wear because you're even fretting softer. So for me, that's a big thing. So I hope you found this video helpful. I'll put some links down below for you guys to go and check out some of these setup documents and videos, some high-speed camera stuff with the string motion. And if you've got any questions, leave them in the comments. As soon as this lockdown is over, I'll be picking up an amp for review, so we'll get to that. But I thought in the meantime, we could have these little short chats about different questions that people ask regularly. So stay well until the next video. Keep making music, keep playing bass, be nice to each other. God bless. I'll see you guys real soon. Bye for now.